Hello, it's Philip Taylor speaking from Richmond Green Chambers in London. Today I'm looking at a book which has come to us from Oxford University Press. I've reviewed it before when it was a slightly different title, published by a different publisher, but it's on costs, and it's called Friston on Costs, now in a third edition, edited by Mark Friston, and I've given it the title, Costs, quote, "Emotive and outstandingly dull at the same time, a foremost contemporary statement on all aspects of the costs regime." Let's look at the book first of all. It's a heavy book, 2,000 odd pages, there it is. There's the spine, nothing on the back. Now, when we look at the back, you can see the index. It's going to be a bit heavy for me to hold. The index is by paragraph numbering. You can see that clearly from there. It's a detailed index, very much in line with the OUP structure. There's the index there itself. Then you've got, after that, various tables right at the back, which will be of some assistance to you. There's a lot of information in this book. If we go to the front of the book, you've got at the front and at the back, on the inside cover, the front cover, you can see you've got some easy banding about hourly rates, and on the back you've got the purpose of electronic bills of costs there. So on the inside cover there's quite a lot of information in addition to the basic information you've got. Now there's the basic front page. You see a lot of people have been involved in contributing, and I'll mention that in a minute. Large number of people, you'll probably recognise quite a few of them. Then there's a little dedication which I always like to show, which you can read, which is from the author. It is important because a lot of people are involved in these books, and I don't review books which I don't really think very much of, because I don't think it's fair on the authors, frankly. They've done a lot of work and I'm not there to hit them hard. I do these reviews specifically so that people know these books depending on what you're looking for. This is the preface to the current edition, the third edition. Then Mark has added the one from the first edition. When he first started, that was under a different publisher, and that was actually Jordan's initially. Of course, Jordan's now been bought out by LexisNexis. There's the summary of contents running the thing, very detailed. You can see all the way through. A lot of information. This is a very, very detailed book. There are the tables of cases, and I'm sure probably some of the cases I've done are in here somewhere, probably, because in fact there's a lot of case law involving costs. And then after that you've got the table of statutes, then statutory instruments. After that, there we go, statutory instruments. Then you've got, after that, practice directions and protocols. Again, very important in this area. When I first started practice, I didn't do very much on costs at all. I have since, in the last few years, got more involved in some aspects of costs because it's so important. Then there's a brief history of costs running all the way through the Anglo-Saxon period, Norman times, Plantagenet, all the way through. So very interesting all the way through to see how we do things. And you can see there is footnoting at the bottom, you can see, and at the side there is the actual paragraph numbering. And again, you've got a very interesting approach all the way through. And then you've got, after that, security for costs, a big area. I mean, every single aspect to do, certainly with the White Book itself, and in fact family court practice too, all of that will be covered depending on what you look for. Now, I'm not here to debunk Cook on Costs because I've reviewed that, although in recent years we haven't had copies to review. But certainly Cook on Costs I always thought was a very, very good book when Michael Cook was writing and editing it. I'm not saying that it's no good or anything like that. It's just that this is the competition now. And what Mark has done, he started off with a relatively slim volume and it's now 2,000 pages. The reason for that is because there's been a bit of an explosion in the way that we look at costs. So what do we say about the book? Well, we say this. We reviewed this excellent book nearly a decade ago when it first appeared. And as I say, it came from what was then Jordan's, and it's now LexisNexis, and obviously they've given the title over and it's been taken by OUP. Many aspects of costs have changed, but Mark Friston's original comment on the subject matter, I think, remains impeccable. Quote, "The law of costs is a paradox in that it can be both emotive and outstandingly dull at the same time. I'm afraid it is, but it's important because it's about money, and the bottom line is who's going to pay, and it's the losing side who normally pays. Not always, but generally. Now, the book has expanded to well over 2,000 pages for the 2018 period onwards. I'm reviewing this at the end of 2018. Quote, more than twice as long as War and Peace, says the author. Absolutely, it's heavy too. I'm glad, although be careful because I don't think that the spine is going to hold on too long because it's a very, very heavy book. Friston's aim, of course, is explained when he writes that the editorial philosophy is broadly the same as that of previous editions, and he's kept to his word, I think. He explains that the focus is on describing the law in full, usually with pinpoint references. Whilst there are many questions that have yet to be addressed by the higher courts, and obviously there are always going to be these issues, Friston has left gaps, but he says he has done his best to provide an analysis which will be of immense assistance to the advocate in court, even though his commentaries are produced with some reluctance. Now, I say that because obviously the commentaries are helpful, but he doesn't really want to be quoted too fully. I mean, the reason for that is because costs are, as we all know, at the discretion of the judge, and therefore you have to bear in mind that there's always going to be that flexibility, and there has to be. Editorial changes, of course, have been introduced for the third edition, and the editor has adopted a gender-neutral language, with most chapters being written with the assistance of at least one other author because of the complexity and the scale of the law of costs. Now, that is obviously covered with the authors of each of the bits in the right at the beginning in the front page and in the contents section. Friston also includes non-binding decisions from the county courts and the courts of first instance, which I found very helpful. I don't think he was too happy on that, although in recognition of the fact that the funding of litigation frequently crosses jurisdictional borders, and obviously there's now an international readership, the editor has used experts beyond the jurisdiction of England and Wales. Excuse me, and I'm grateful for that too, because I think that shows you we're much more global in our approach. And of course, of great use to the modern advocate is the inclusion of topics which go to the provision of legal services in general and the post-LASPO age, including legal project management, value-based pricing and litigation funding, always, of course, a big issue. It's well described, I think, quote, as the acclaimed authority on civil costs law. That's exactly what I think it is. It was previously known as civil cost law and practice, and it's separated into 16 parts as a substantial text covering all aspects of the law of civil costs, from the formation of contracts of retainers, funding, cost budgeting, the very important, of course, with Precedent H, and orders for and about costs, all the way through to the assessment of costs and beyond. Therefore, it's our view that it's most suitable for a very wide range of practitioners. I think it will also be of help, although it's a heavy book, and it's a book obviously for lawyers, but I think unrepresented parties should know about it, depending on where they are, because some of them are quite experienced as personal advocates, although they don't have obviously the same training. And one of the difficulties with costs is you can be making quite narrow distinctions sometimes in order to succeed. Let me conclude by saying that the extensive updating that Mark has done takes into account changes in the law following the Jackson reforms, and obviously he's included discussions on the Consumer Rights Act 2015, including ADR, alternative methods of pricing, as I said, legal project management, as mentioned above, and other aspects, which I think are becoming much more directly relevant, because I don't see any return to the old type of legal aid that we've had, and so costs will of course always be very important. And I will say, and I've said it before, it is a rich man or rich person's business, because you don't launch proceedings today the way they used to under Blair, where people would just at the drop of a hat start proceedings. You don't do it that way. This is the big boys game, frankly, and it costs a great deal of money. And I tell clients that because some of them don't seem to grasp even now the seriousness of what happens if you lose. and what bill you will get, especially in the higher courts. Although that is published more openly now than it used to be. Finally, let me say this, that Mark Friston excuse me, features thorough cross-referencing throughout the book, enabling the user to easily locate answers to even the most complex of costs issues. And I think it's undoubtedly an invaluable resource for costs judges and practitioners alike. And I think it's got a wider sort of aim than that. The book was published on the 20th of December 2018, so it's only just come out. I'm very grateful to Mark for producing it and to OUP for taking it on. So I say it's a very heavy book. It's rather nice purple, I think. There we go, there's the front and the side again. Let me open it in the middle. The pages are quite thin, but they wouldn't tear or anything like that. This is Contracts of Retainer, General Principles. You see the paragraph numbering at the sides, there and there, and the footnoting. And then you've got quite a lot of subheads as well to help you find things. Interesting, you do have a few figures as well to show you some of the legal needs of small businesses, 2015. Again, he's not going into bat for any particular side, but what he's trying to do here is show what the problems are that we've had. The details of assessment as between solicitor and client, for instance. You've got a whole range of very detailed information. I would not be surprised if this is certainly recognised as it's just come out, but recognised as probably the most important work on costs that we now have. And I'd like to thank Mark very much indeed for producing this new edition with all the people involved. I can't mention them by name. And also to OUP for producing, I think, an excellent book, which will be of great value to all of us. Thank you very much indeed before it falls down. It's a bit like War and Peace, only it's on 2 volumes. Thank you, Mark, anyway. Bye-bye.